I'm working the information desk at Krakow's main train station when an American woman, mid-40s, sporting a World Traveler fanny pack, approaches with visible frustration. "Excuse me, but why are all the signs in Polish? This is Eastern Germany, right?" I blink. "Ma'am, this is Poland." "Krakow, Poland." She pulls out her phone, shows me a map where she circled a large portion of Central Europe. "See, I specifically booked Eastern Europe, which my travel agent said was the Germany near Russia. Prague is the capital, correct?" "Prague is in Czech Republic." "You're in Poland?" "Different country." She's unfazed. "Okay, but they all used to be one country under the Soviet thing, so technically it's the same destination. I paid for the Eastern Europe package, which, according to my research, is basically East Germany with cheaper beer. Now, can you direct me to the Berlin Wall section of this city?" My itinerary says it's a must-see. I explain that the Berlin Wall is in Berlin, Germany, approximately 600 kilometers away. She insists I'm being deliberately confusing because her cruise ship stopped in Eastern Europe last year, and it all looked exactly like this. Demands to speak to someone who can. Explain why Poland is pretending not to be Germany, and whether this constitutes false advertising under international travel law. If you're all ready, learning more about the world in 3 minutes here than in 12 years of geography class. Subscribing is how you make sure your map of reality keeps getting smarter. She leaves, threatening to report this geographic inconsistency to TripAdvisor, muttering something about how Europe needs better labeling. Through the window, I watch her approach a local, loudly asking for directions to Checkpoint Charlie. I'm a park ranger in Tasmania when an American couple in their 60s arrives at the information center, visibly upset. "Been driving for 3 hours," the husband announces, "and we still haven't found the bridge to mainland Australia. Our GPS keeps saying we're on an island, but that can't be right because we flew into Australia. And islands are small things you can walk around." I explain that Tasmania is indeed an island state of Australia, separated by Bass Strait. The wife interrupts. "But we're in Australia. We went through Australian customs. Islands are separate countries like Hawaii. Wait, is Tasmania its own country using Australian airport security? Is this a sovereignty issue?" Her husband pulls out a crumpled map where he's drawn a land bridge connecting Tasmania to Victoria. "According to my calculations based on continental drift, there should be a natural land formation here. Is it underwater? Do we need to wait for low tide?" I show them a proper map. They're convinced it's tourist propaganda designed to sell more ferry tickets. The husband theorizes that Tasmania is actually a secret Australian government project to create artificial landmass. The island story is a cover-up. He cites basic geology he learned from a YouTube video about Pangaea. They leave demanding to see the real map that locals use, convinced that there's a secret tunnel system that Australians use to avoid telling tourists about the bridge. Later, I get a call from the ferry terminal. They're arguing that the ferry is unnecessary and demanding a refund because bridges are free. I'm working at a hotel in Reykjavik, Iceland, when an American family checks in, parents and 2 teenagers, all wearing shorts and t-shirts despite it being October. The father immediately approaches. "Quick question, what time does the sun set tonight? We want to schedule our Iceland activities before we drive to Norway for dinner." "Sunset is around 6:47 p.m. But sir, Norway is another country. It's not a driving distance." He laughs. "Come on," I looked at the map. "It's right there above Iceland. Maybe 3-4 hours with good traffic." I pull up a map showing the Norwegian Sea between Iceland and Norway. "Sir, there's ocean between us. You'd need a flight or ferry." His wife joins in. "But on the map, they look like they're touching." "Are you saying maps aren't to scale? Because that seems like a design flaw. Our GPS has Iceland and Norway in the same zoom level, so they must be close," the teenage daughter adds. "Dad planned our whole trip around hitting 5 Nordic countries in 3 days because they all looked clustered together on Google Maps." The father becomes defensive. "I specifically chose Iceland as our base because it's centrally located in Scandinavia. You're telling me I need to fly to countries that appear to be within driving distance? This is exactly why America uses miles. Everything's clearer. He demands I show him the secret road that locals use, suggesting that perhaps there's an underwater tunnel like the Channel. When I explain that the Channel is only about 50 kilometers, while the distance to Norway is roughly 1,000 kilometers of open ocean, he accuses me of gatekeeping travel routes and insists there must be a seasonal ice bridge that connects the countries in winter. They spend their entire 3-day Iceland trip researching suppressed information about Nordic land connections, convinced that the ferry industry has created a conspiracy to hide perfectly good driving routes. I'm a customs officer in Singapore when an American businessman, expensive suit, confident demeanor, approaches my desk with his passport. "Is this the checkpoint for Malaysia?" he asks. "No, sir. You've just arrived in Singapore from the United States. Malaysia is a different country." He looks confused. "Right, but Singapore is in Malaysia. Like how Washington, D.C. is in America, but also its own thing. So this is the inner checkpoint before I get to actual Malaysia, correct?" I explain that Singapore is a completely independent nation. It's not part of Malaysia. He opens his briefcase, pulls out printed Google results. "See, it says here Singapore, officially the Republic of Singapore, is a sovereign island city-state in maritime Southeast Asia. But I also read that Malaysia is in Southeast Asia. So logically, Singapore must be inside Malaysia. It's like how Vatican City is in Rome. Singapore was part of Malaysia briefly in the 1960s. But we've been independent since 1965. We're a separate country. He's not accepting this." "Okay, but you use the same language, right? And probably the same money? Because small places usually just adopt the big neighbor's currency. So when I exchange my dollars, do I ask for Malaysian money? Or is it the same thing with different pictures?" I show him Singapore currency versus Malaysian ringgit. He studies both, then announces, "These look suspiciously similar. This feels like the Euro situation where everyone pretends they have different money, but it's all interchangeable." He proceeds to explain his theory that Singapore is a premium district of Malaysia, like how Monaco is technically France, but with better branding. He references a college geography course from 1987, where he's certain they learned that small Asian places are usually just neighborhoods of bigger Asian places. I stamp his passport for Singapore entry. He asks if he needs a separate stamp for when he enters the Malaysian part of Singapore. As he walks away, I hear him on the phone. "Yeah, I'm in Singapore, Malaysia. It's complicated. They have this whole dual identity thing going on. I'm a tour guide in Buenos Aires when an American couple books a day tour. Arriving in heavy winter coats despite it being November, the husband immediately complains. Your weather report must be broken. Our app said 25 degrees, so we prepared for cold weather, but it's actually warm. Is there a microclimate situation in this specific neighborhood? Sir, 25 degrees Celsius is about 77 Fahrenheit. It's spring here, approaching summer. The wife looks genuinely shocked. Summer. In November. That's impossible. November is Thanksgiving. It's fall. Is Argentina using a different calendar system? I explain the southern hemisphere has opposite seasons. The husband rejects this immediately. No, seasons are seasons. They don't flip upside down just because you're below the equator. That's not how the Earth works. We're on the same planet, his wife adds. We specifically packed for autumn in South America because it's autumn everywhere in November. Are you suggesting that God made two different seasonal systems? That seems inefficient. I pull up a diagram showing Earth's axial tilt and how it affects seasons in different hemispheres. The husband studies it suspiciously. This looks like one of those optical illusions. The Earth can't be tilted, we'd all slide off. I think what's really happening is Argentina is experiencing climate change faster than the northern hemisphere. So your seasons are confused? He spends the entire tour taking temperature readings and writing them down, convinced he's documenting hemispheric seasonal displacement. At one point, he asks if Christmas in Argentina is fake Christmas, or if they celebrate it in June, when it's actually winter. The wife wants to know if their Thanksgiving dinner will cook differently in southern hemisphere ovens due to reversed heat patterns. When I assure her ovens work the same everywhere, she seems disappointed. Like I've ruined her theory about inverted thermodynamics. They leave me a 3-star review stating, "Guide was pleasant but clearly misinformed about basic seasonal science. Recommend bringing your own weather equipment." I'm working at a car rental agency in Perth, Australia, when an American man insists on renting a car to drive to Sydney for the weekend. Sir, Sydney is about 3,900 kilometers away. That's roughly 42 hours of non-stop driving. He laughs. Oh, no way. I looked at a map of Australia. It's about the same size as Texas, maybe slightly bigger. Perth to Sydney can't be more than 6 or 7 hours. I pull up an actual size comparison. Australia is nearly 10 times the size of Texas. He stares at it, then at me. This is a distorted map. Those Mercator projection things. In reality, Australia is much smaller because it's an island, and islands are by definition compact. Sir, Australia is a continent. It's the 6th largest country in the world by land area. He becomes animated. It can't be both an island and a continent. You have to pick one. Islands are small. Continents are big. Australia is called an island, therefore it's small. This is basic logic. I show him a route map with fuel stops and overnight stays needed for a Perth-Sydney drive. He insists on padding the distance to sell more rental days. He pulls out his phone, shows me a screenshot where he zoomed out on Google Maps so both cities appear on the screen together. See? They're both visible at once, which means they're close. If they were actually thousands of kilometers apart, they wouldn't fit in one view. That's how maps work. I suggest flying, which takes about 5 hours. He refuses, citing airport security hassle and insisting that driving is always faster for domestic travel because you're already on the ground. He eventually rents the car, planning to prove me wrong. 3 days later, cars returned from Adelaide less than halfway to Sydney with a note from another rental office. Customer exhausted. Admitted Australia is surprisingly stretched out. Took a flight to Sydney. Please refund mileage overcharge. Most channels point and laugh at the headline. Here we dig into what these moments reveal about how people see the world. If that distinction matters to you, you already belong with the Place subscribers. I'm a receptionist at a medical clinic in Stockholm, Sweden, when an American tourist arrives, upset and demanding to see a doctor immediately. I've been exposed to extreme cold temperatures for the past 3 days, she announces. I need to be checked for hypothermia and possibly frostbite. I was not warned that Sweden is an Arctic country. It's September. The temperature is about 15 degrees Celsius, roughly 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Ma'am, you seem fine. Can you describe your symptoms? I don't have symptoms yet. This is preventative medicine. I've been walking around in 15-degree weather for 3 days. In America, we'd be in emergency situations at this temperature. I need a professional to assess the damage. I realize she thinks 15 degrees Celsius is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Ma'am, 15 Celsius is nearly 60 Fahrenheit. It's mild autumn weather. She pulls out her phone, showing screenshots of Swedish weather reports. Every single day says temperatures in the teens. That's below freezing. I specifically Googled whether Sweden is survivable in September, and multiple sources said temperatures would be in the teens. I assumed that meant high teens Fahrenheit, like 17 or 18, which is cold, but manageable with layers. I explained the Celsius system. She's having none of it. So you're telling me that Europe uses a temperature system where 15 degrees is actually warm? That's incredibly misleading. What happens at 0 degrees? Does water boil? This system seems designed to confuse tourists, she demands. Documentation about Celsius to Fahrenheit. Conversion certified by a medical professional. Because she doesn't trust random internet? Converters. She's convinced that the real temperature has been much colder than reported and that she's been unknowingly surviving Arctic conditions as she leaves, still skeptical. She asks whether Swedish people have evolved thicker blood to survive such numerically low temperatures. I assure her that Swedish blood is identical to American blood. She looks doubtful. I'm coordinating a cultural exchange program between American high school students and a school in Ljubljana, Slovenia. The American students arrive, and within the first hour, one raises her hand during orientation. I have a question about the language. We learned some Russian phrases to prepare, but everyone here speaks Slovenian. When does the transition happen? Like, is Russian for formal occasions and Slovenian for casual talk? Our Slovenian coordinator, bemused, explains that Slovenia has never used Russian as an official language. The student looks confused. But Slovenia was part of the Soviet Union, right? So everyone learned Russian in school, like how Americans learn English. Another student adds, "Yeah, our teacher said to prepare for Slavic languages. And we Googled that Russian is the main Slavic language. So we figured it would be useful here." The coordinator patiently explains that while Slovenia was part of Yugoslavia, it was never part of the Soviet Union, and Slovenian is its own distinct language. The students look at each other, and one asks, "Wait, Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union were different things?" What follows is a 45-minute impromptu geography lesson where we clarify that Slovenia, Slovakia, and Slovenia are all different places. That being Slavic doesn't mean being Russian. That Yugoslavia wasn't the same as the USSR. And that learning Russian for a trip to Slovenia is like learning Portuguese for a trip to Italy because they're both European languages. One student, trying to be helpful, suggests that Eastern Europe should really consider standardizing their languages to make travel easier. Like how all of America speaks English. It's the Slovenian students, who collectively speak Slovenian, English, German, in various levels of Italian and Croatian, choose diplomatic silence. The American students spend the rest of the exchange genuinely engaged and curious, asking thoughtful questions once they realize that their initial assumptions were built on a fascinating combination of partial information and creative geography. By the end of the week, they've learned to locate Slovenia on a map without hesitation, distinguish it from Slovakia, and even pick up a few Slovenian phrases. On their last day, one student admits, "I always thought geography was boring, but it turns out I just didn't know how much I didn't know." This was actually kind of mind-blowing. Sometimes the best education happens when the map in your head meets the actual world, and you're humble enough to redraw it. Because geography isn't just about where places are. It's about understanding that the world is vastly more complex, diverse, and wonderfully surprising than any single perspective can capture. If this story expanded your map of how people see the world, imagine having that shift every week. Subscribe, and don't let your worldview shrink back to default settings.